Everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Race podcast, where we get under the hood of interesting scaling stories. Will and I are here today with Faye Haddadi, Head of HR at Xampla. Welcome to the podcast, Faye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, you're more than welcome. Thanks for making the time. So the episode theme today is going to be around what happens to culture after funding, which I think is a really interesting point. And we're going to talk a little bit about sort of scaling people, process and identity without breaking the company, which is quite challenging. Been there myself, and it's a huge part of scaling. And I actually feel this is going to be really interesting because I don't think many people think about this when they get the money. So we're looking forward to this one. But look, a good place to start, Faye, is tell us a little about yourself and your role at Xampla, first of all.
Yeah, sure. So I joined Xampla over 5 years ago now. And I was lucky enough to join at the very beginning of the Xampla journey. So I've had the pleasure of really building the people function from the ground up, essentially. So kind of my focus and my belief is around real people-centered HR. And I've got a real passion for kind of nurturing inclusive cultures and making sure that we really develop leaders to be the best leaders that they can be for a business. And now something that I genuinely believe and through my experience have come to realize is that you can't build a great business unless your people, your purpose, and the performance genuinely align. So my experience really, I come from kind of fast scaling tech organizations and business partnering with leaders to make sure that we're designing and delivering people strategies that really support accelerated growth. And that's across the full employee life cycle. So that's a little bit about me and my background.
Okay, interesting. Well suited to help Xampla achieve what they're trying to achieve then. And for people that are sort of unfamiliar with the business, what's the sort of problem or problems that you and the team are trying to solve?
Yeah, so Xampla, essentially, our mission is to replace the most polluting single-use plastics with natural polymers made from plants. So our technology is grounded in over 15 years of fundamental protein research from the University of Cambridge. And we have developed Moro, which is basically a new class of material. It's a high performance replacement for single-use plastics, and it can be used to support the food service industry, packaging companies, to provide an alternative to plastic or single-use plastics that really has the same performance. Now, we are really pleased to be in market across multiple European territories through partnerships with companies such as Just Eat Takeaway, Bunzl, Huhtamaki, DIC, and we're in a period of scaling production towards 10,000 tons a year, which is very exciting.
Wow. No, that's really impressive, and also a very obvious problem that needs to be solved, right?
Yes.
I'm guilty of it. I get gusto and we have it for 4 meals a week. But the thing I hate about it is it's great because you get the perfect ingredients, but it's mainly all little bits of plastic. So if we could not have that, I would feel a lot better about it for sure.
Yeah, and actually we did do a project with Gusto a couple of years ago looking at essentially making packaging disappear by using some of our soluble films to replace the packaging that they have on their stock cubes, so that rather than having throwaway packaging, you're putting that in with the stock cube and literally it's disappearing into the stock, which is a very exciting, very novel application of our material.
Because I've had this sort of packaging before where it sort of looks like a little bits of polystyrene, but you use the water and it just degrades immediately. I mean, even
Yeah.
that, but it's amazing how many packages don't have that in. And you think, well, I appreciate it's probably not the cheapest. These things generally aren't, but to sort of move away from that one-use polystyrene and all the rest of it, that's sort of a no-brainer, right? So it's an exciting part of this part of the world.
It is, exactly. And I think, having a mission that really supports the betterment of the future of the planet is key. And it really is something that aligns all of the people that we have in the business.
Yeah. So sounds like Xampla have done a really remarkable job so far. Where is the company currently in its sort of growth journey from a funding and a people perspective?
Yeah, so we have secured more than 30 million in funding over our journey so far. We recently closed our Series A in summer last year, and we're currently in our kind of scaling phase. So we're generating revenue. And it's all about making commercially viable calls. It's no longer about just exploring in the lab. So we very much shifted and moved from kind of R&D led, academia rooted ways of working to commercial scaling. So our mono materials now in market, we're producing it at scale. And really the key thing is that our people strategy has had to mature alongside the business maturing into that scaling phase.
It's interesting. I think well, one of the things that I learned when I scaled the last business I was involved in, we were behind the curve in what you've just said there.
Yeah.
I think partly because we didn't have the right people in the right positions in that part of the business.
Yeah.
Again, you live and learn, but it's good that you're ahead of it. So that's really interesting. Look forward to getting into this.
Yes.
I'm going to put a marker here. Give me 2 seconds, guys. My fan won't turn on and this office is stifling.
You've got better weather than we have, Alex.
Is this what you meant, Will, about keeping the cock-ups in?
Yeah, exactly. Keep it.
Your outtakes. You can do your outtakes.
Yeah,
Are we okay so far?
Like I say, I think this is going to be one of the most interesting podcasts. A lot of our demographic is like 75% founders.
Yeah.
And I think they would listen to this and go, that's a lot of stuff I've not thought about. And I'm currently going through my seed or series A or whatever it might be. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, there's lots of, I'm excited to share actually. There's lots of bits to cover. So I'm excited about this.
There's a book, I mean, off topic, but again, we keep all of this in. There's a book that in my previous company, they kind of made all of the leadership team read, which is called Good to Great. And I'm not sure if you've read it, but if you haven't, I think it's fantastic. And it touches on your point there, Alex, about getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus. And I find that early on. People.
I think
that's a bit, it's making those tough people decisions and acting on them rather than just hiding from them, which can be the default because it's not your natural comfort zone, to make these difficult decisions and have these difficult conversations.
Yeah, I think when you're small, it feels more personal. You feel like you are genuinely taking something away from that individual when, it's not. It's the job and you're a company, you've got to make the right decisions, but you feel bad.
Yeah.
If you've given people the right platform, the right training, the right support, and it's still not there and it's still not right, you have to make a tough decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Xampla's moved from sort of early stage innovation to commercial scaling. So I guess interested to hear what changes internally once that funding lands.
Yeah. So for us, it really has been kind of a shift from that deep technical exploration to thinking and focusing commercially. So now we're at a stage where we're asking ourselves at every point, is this commercially viable? And at that point, we have to decide what do we move ahead with and what things do we cut, essentially. And now this way of working is very much supported through our values. So for instance, our innovate value and the wording that supports that says that we see failure as a foundation of innovation and a catalyst to success. So it's giving people permission to say, okay, that didn't work. We'll learn from that and then we'll move forward quickly. So the whole premise really around that is about failing fast. And if you don't have the ability to fail fast, you can waste a lot of time, energy, resource, money on things that are just not going to help move your business forward in the right way. And what we found is that it's required a genuine mindset change from quite a lot of people, especially those who maybe joined at the early stage for the kind of academic or R&D based freedom, that's been a real journey for those people and something that we've had to actively recognize and support them through.
That's fascinating. Really, really interesting that you built that into the culture almost. We were having this conversation yesterday about failure, the fear of failure, and holding people back, and culturally, UK versus the US. And I mean, topic for another conversation, but it's great to see that you're building that into the culture from an early start. I mean, that can only be
I think you have to, because I think nothing good ever came from pointing the finger of blame and making people fear failure, because actually we're an innovation company. And if you don't fail, you can't move forward. You can't get learnings from that. So we really wanted to embrace the importance of failure and not allow people to be afraid of the consequences of that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And then, so along that journey, what pressures do you think suddenly become more visible?
So the pressure to essentially generate revenue and to prove commercial value. This wasn't the same calculation maybe 4 or 5 years ago for our business. So decisions have become more about prioritization and trade-offs rather than doing everything that we can to the nth degree, essentially. And like I mentioned before, for some people, that's a really hard mindset shift, and especially for a by default perfectionist workforce, it's been quite challenging for some.
Yeah.
I think just on that then, because I think that's quite an interesting point, and I totally agree with it. But with that in mind, with that sort of pressure for commerciality,
Yeah.
did you sort of have to work with the execs that still that failure was fine as long as you do it fast, or did they just say no, that's how we do it? Yes, we need to be commercial, but we still want to encourage that way of thinking and that way of trying and running things.
Yeah, so there was no encouragement about it, actually. Our leadership team are all on board that this is a really important part of how Xampla operates. It always has been and it always will be, because acknowledging failure allows us to move and pivot quickly and be more agile and adaptable. So actually, it's more of a shift in mindset amongst employees than it has been amongst leadership, really.
It's interesting.
You mentioned earlier sort of like your background in sort of high growth environment. So obviously got a lot of experience in that world. So from your experience, what tends to surprise founders most about scaling teams?
Yeah, I suppose it is an acknowledgement that the people who got you to where you are now are automatically the profile that you might need for the next stage of your business journey. Really, the priority becomes versatility and commercial application, essentially. So it's no longer hiring or looking for somebody with that really niche technical depth of knowledge. So if you're looking to hire somebody with a kind of 100% box ticking perfect candidate for a very niche technical role, that's great for the here and now, but it could actually work against you in the future if that deep technical skill set doesn't come with a degree of adaptability. And so what we've done is try to focus on coaching the team and encouraging them to embrace and think about being adaptable and how they can utilize their skills across different applications or different areas of the business to support changing business needs, essentially.
Right. Okay. And do you think that growth naturally creates tension inside a company?
Yeah, I think that's completely normal. So for us, an example of this could be around how our business has interpreted our value of excellence. So for a lot of the team, excellence really means perfectionism. And that can lead to people getting quite stuck in the weeds of the specifics of a certain issue related to a certain project, and inability to take a step back, assess if this is right for the business, if it's commercially viable, if it's necessary, and then move forward from it. So people can really get kind of stuck in one place. For me, excellence means having agility and being able to deliver for the customer in the most sensible way. And so it's thinking about what that means. And I think acknowledging and kind of navigating those tensions openly is just a really normal part of scaling healthily. So there's always going to be tensions, but it's addressing them, naming them, and responding and acknowledging them, kind of dealing with them, that is the key to getting through them.
I think that term scaling healthily, I've not heard that before, but I think that's a really poignant statement. It is exactly that, scaling
Yeah.
healthily. That's really interesting. I like that. Okay, so looking at maybe moving sort of from that early stage to commerciality, I guess, for a little while.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned before about the academic to commercial shift. I certainly went through a similar pain in my last business, that sort of
Yeah.
startup to scale up, which sort of really surprised me. But what in your mind, what does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah. Okay. So I think for us, I suppose what's really happened is that there's been a shift from kind of a freewheeling, lab-led kind of startup and flexibility to a business that's scaling and has to think commercially. And like I mentioned before, for some early joiners, that can feel like a bit of a loss of the old freedom, and it can feel more constrained than what they're used to. But it's really a discipline of deciding what's viable rather than exploring every single avenue. So people still have freedom and flexibility, but it's about taking a step back and assessing throughout that journey rather than going down a rabbit hole that isn't actually going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
And I think kind of alongside that, it's about having a shift in acceptance of the fact that we are now answerable to our customers. You know, it's a real realization that they kind of lead a lot of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that's a maturity thing, isn't it? Which
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
won't have in the start, and people might not even be doing it for that. They're doing it for
Yeah.
the experience and the scientific side of whatever it is you're building or creating, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't care about the end user, even though everyone needs to. Everyone needs to be customer centric these days.
Exactly.
And then how have you sort of found sort of process can sometimes create resistance sort of inside a business when you're scaling?
Yeah. So, you know, from experience, early stage cultures kind of naturally prize autonomy and experimentation, and then adopting and kind of putting in place processes can feel like it's constraining that for some people. But you know, my view on process is that it should really be there to enable scale and to protect people, not just put in hoops and hurdles for the sake of it. And I've found that actually explaining why process has been introduced is the key. So actually, people understand the need for it and buy into that, and adoption is then far more quicker and painless if you're explaining the need and the why behind the decision to put process in.
Yeah. I always remember in my last role where we just had the simple rule, look, if it feels like you're taking the piss, you
Yeah,
probably are.
yeah,
So, and that worked. That really worked. And then what we had is one person really did take the mick, and then
mm,
that sort of spread like wildfire because I heard so and so did this. So it's okay if you take a client out, you can do X, Y, and Z. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah,
whoa, whoa, whoa. Back down on the champagne, people. You don't need to you don't need to buy champagne for clients.
yeah.
And for anyone listening, and also Faye, if you've not read it, the Netflix book, No Rules Rules,
Okay, yeah.
is phenomenal around this
Okay.
subject. Really fascinating. And obviously Netflix are a big beast and they've still got it.
Mm,
As in like there are no policies around expenses and stuff like that. So
yeah.
it's fascinating.
It's funny. I think they're constantly evolving. Policies have to constantly evolve with the changing nature of the business, the changing nature of the people that you have within the business.
Yeah.
And quite often, you think you've covered everything, but there's always something that comes up. You think we need to adapt what we've got to prevent or support that in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I'll definitely watch that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then you sort of touched on a little bit, I guess, but why do you feel sort of process does sometimes create that resistance inside a scaling business? What is it about people that they just don't buy into? I think, your point about adoption and getting the adoption by explaining the reasoning is obviously smart and
Yeah.
needed. But is there sort of, any other thoughts around sort of why that can sometimes happen, that resistance?
I think I think people just feel naturally people struggle with change, or a lot of people struggle with change. And I think if they see change happening and they're not part of the kind of driving force behind that change, and it feels like it's been done to somebody rather than it's a collaborative kind of journey together, it can create resistance. It can be difficult for people to accept. So, like I mentioned before, explaining the why behind it, explaining the
Mm,
reason behind it, bringing people on that journey with you of change is absolutely key, I think.
yeah, absolutely. And then how do you introduce that sort of structure without killing the agility or killing the culture side of it? Because it's a different beast. The company is changing and sometimes that happens.
Yeah. So don't get me wrong, we have policies and our policies are growing and evolving all the time. But what I've found the best method really is to anchor structure in values rather than in rules for the sake of it. So our values at Xampla really exist to support the business that we plan to be in the next 3 to 5 years, not just the business we are now or the business that we once were. So actually continuously reviewing values against the business strategy is key. It's an essential part of what we do. And actually, we look to do that sort of once or twice a year, just review our values and say, do these still support our business strategy? Do these underpin the culture that will get us to where we need to be in the next 3, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be? And sort of going back to our value of excellence example. So defining excellence as agility and commercial sense helps structure process that speeds up delivery rather than essentially or potentially slowing it down if we decided to make excellence the focus of perfectionism, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. And then what about, when early employees struggle with that sort of next phase,
Yeah.
How can you sort of help that? That's really challenging, and we really struggled with that.
Yeah. And, there are so many people that really thrive on early stage chaos and can find that
Yeah.
shift to a little bit more structured or commercially phased and business. They sort of find that genuinely hard. And they might feel that the company's changing around them, or that the role they signed up for has moved or shifted beyond a point where they're comfortable. But I've kind of alluded to this before, but really the goal is to bring those people on that journey with you. Change doesn't always happen overnight. It's genuine. It's often a gradual shift. So I think it's important to be honest with people about the fact that the operating model is essentially evolving,
Mm.
investing in the development and the coaching of those individuals to get them through that change process and to bring them on that journey with you, and building out career paths with individuals. It's a collaborative process so that people can find their place in the next phase of the business rather than feeling that the business has changed and they've been left behind. And something that we've done to support that is really embed kind of a coaching mindset and a coaching culture across the business. And that's something that our CEO, Alexandra French, has absolutely championed. She's an ENCC accredited coach, and she has worked really hard, with me and the rest of the leadership team to make sure that our managers are coaching individuals to be able to adapt effectively to the changing needs of our business.
Yeah, super smart. I think as well, it's a case of not letting the funding land and then go, surprise, this is the new company. Get way ahead of it, way ahead of it. This is what we're transitioning to. This is the exciting part. This is the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
people leave it too late.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm interested in your opinion on this. So, do you feel companies can successfully scale without being more operationally mature?
I think realistically, probably not. But the key is that maturity doesn't have to mean inflexibility and being too rigid. I think strategic, deliberate growth and adaptable people let you mature operationally while still staying dynamic and
Mm,
meeting the changing needs of the business. Because, all businesses change and grow and develop and shift over time. But in a kind of, a fast scaling, fast moving tech industry, that's heightened and it happens just a lot quicker.
yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And then what about founders sometimes romanticizing perhaps the early stage culture too much? Do you find that's been a bit of an issue in your career?
Yeah, I think, quite often this is their baby and they care a lot about it. And we all have a tendency to view things with rose tinted glasses. But don't get me wrong, there's absolute value in early stage energy. But I think if you romanticize it too much and hold on to it too much, it can hold your business back from being able to progress in the right way. So I think the focus is to keep what really matters to the business as you scale, but accepting alongside that operating models have to evolve. And so for Xampla, what really matters to us is our mission. So our mission to eliminate the world's most polluting plastics is key. And that's delivered through our values and the behaviors associated with our values. So our values really underpin and set the expectations that support our growth, whilst also connecting our people to the business, but also connecting each other to each other, and having that cross functional collaboration as well. And what is key is that the values, behaviors that really underpin this have to be role modeled by leadership if they're to be adopted and embedded successfully within the culture across the business.
Yeah, impossible to get adoption for this stuff unless it's coming from the top, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's absolutely critical. But that also comes back to the founder hiring the right type of people, not doing the classic, well, I know that bloke, so you end up with a board who's a white male, 30s, beard, all think the same, look the same. That comes back like really early stage. And again, with a founder that's been there and done this,
Yeah.
you get that. With a founder who doesn't know what he doesn't know because he doesn't never done it before, you
Yeah.
do end up that, and they've not thought about diversity in a board and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But it's amazing how it all comes back to those very early decisions. It's
It does.
fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And quite often, like you said, by the time you get to the scaling stage, it's hard to unravel those early decisions if you've not been aware of the potential consequences from an earlier stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think having someone like you in place at an early stage phase is so, transformational in many
Yeah,
ways, because a lot of people leave that hire too late, I think.
totally.
Yeah, they can do. And I know, having HR within a business, especially at an early stage, can be seen as an added luxury, and not everybody has, the financial ability to be able to do that. But there are a lot of other kind of fractional HR resources that support early stage businesses to make the right kind of hiring decisions and to really understand what their culture is, and help build that strategically and thoughtfully, rather than just letting it evolve organically, which sometimes can be great. And there is an element of that that's important, but left to its own devices, it can sometimes go off course, and it doesn't truly reflect the needs of the business, or the business that you want to kind of move towards in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so looking at kind of some of the people challenges that founders underestimate, what people challenges do you think consistently catch scaling businesses off guard?
Yeah, so for us, it's been that academic to commercial kind of mindset shift, primarily among technical hires. So in the early days, it was very much a technical heavy workforce. Um, and I think there may have been an underestimation at the beginning of how much support it actually takes to develop adaptability and agility within those kind of narrow and niche technical hires. So a key area of focus for us was about building resilience within the technical team, because not all projects will always move forward. And for some, that was quite hard to rationalize, the fact that every single bit of work they do might not amount to anything. So we've spent a lot of time coaching and supporting people to build resilience. But I think underestimating maybe how much versatility is needed as priorities kind of move and shift can mean that if you're not hiring for versatility in the early days, you're setting your business, sorry, up to kind of lag going forward. So for us, and you kind of touched on this before, but I think hiring from across different industries has really helped us to bring kind of a diversity of thinking into our workforce, and a range of approaches to help manage the kind of journey of scale. So we bring people in from the chemicals industry, from FMCG, from academia. I think having that real range of skill sets and ways of approaching things has been key to be able to move through this scale journey quite successfully.
Yeah, it's a real strength. I think it also that's fantastic that you're putting such an early focus on specifically that versatility piece. I mean, I've not really seen
Yeah.
people talk about hiring for culture in a startup, but without really defining what that means. And if
Yeah.
people say we want people that have worked in a startup in a fast moving environment. But I mean, honestly, you're probably one of the first people that I've spoken to that have put a real definition on, and I'm sure that's just one piece of your hiring process, but to
Yeah.
define that skill set and say that's something, because everybody knows in a startup scale up, it's not a straight line. You're going to be going forwards, then
No.
backwards, and then you're going to be doing one thing one day, one thing another.
Yeah.
Trying to define what that actually is in a skill set, and then also train your existing team on that.
Mm.
I mean, it's great. It's great to hear that you guys are doing all of these things.
We're trying to.
Yeah. And then what sort of, I guess, happens when companies delay difficult people decisions?
Yeah. So there's a cost element to that. Costs can really compound if you don't deal with, or face difficult people decisions early on, with kind of the changing employment law landscape and strengthening of employee positions, and exiting people from the business becomes harder. But during that time as well, problems can really build. That impacts culture, it impacts your colleagues, it impacts productivity, it's workflows more widely. And it really pays to hire adaptable people that have a breadth of versatility and a willingness to be involved in different projects, different areas, and grow that skill set. So it pays to hire those kinds of people that you can redeploy, rather than having to reshape things down the line, which is challenging and costly for the business and for the people within it.
Yeah. Oh, on that costly piece, then, so what hiring mistakes become expensive later?
Like I said, hiring purely for can we pause for a second? Because although I put a note on the door saying, I'm recording a podcast, please don't come in, my daughter's just come in from school and completely ignored.
Well, at least give us a wave. You can't walk past the camera without waving.
No,
Come
really have to
on.
wave now.
You're on a podcast.
Might be famous.
Yeah. Hello. Don't worry about it. It's all part of it.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm I'm waiting for the same interruption. My kids are on the way home, and I'm all the same rules, but who knows? You never know what's going to happen.
Well, I think I asked half the same question, because my wife's having a meltdown with our 4-year-old, and I was trying to read what she was saying, whether I had to do anything or not. So don't worry about it. We've all gone through it already. I'm not even going to edit this out. I'm just going to keep this normal.
So you said about hiring mistakes can potentially become expensive later on. So I think if you hire purely for that narrow or kind of niche technical expertise, without that versatility, there's a temptation to do that at the very beginning, especially in, our business. It was very much, we're developing a new technology. We need some specialists to be able to support that process. But realistically, what might look good on paper and what might fill a gap or a specific need at that moment in time can limit how you deploy that person in the future as the business changes. So I think, yes, you need people who have the right kind of skill set to support the business now, but think about adaptability, willingness, versatility, and all of those kind of cultural and value alignments that allow that person to grow and develop within your changing business.
Okay. And how have you seen the sort of talent bar change internally after funding? I mean, often people talk about raising it. I don't think that happens without being deliberate about it. But how have you seen it?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a repeat of what I've mentioned before. But for us, it was a very deliberate move from, does this person tick every technical box? To actually, do they have an interest in what we do? Do their values align with those of our business? Are their behaviors going to support our values-driven behaviors? Do they have a strong enough base for us to build on for them to be successful within their role now and in the future? So again, it comes back to that breadth and that versatility. And that's as important as having kind of raw technical capability.
Right. Okay. And then what capabilities do you feel become critical once businesses start scaling commercially?
Yeah, for us, it's definitely been that commercial application of technical knowledge. That's the key for us, and that's something that we're working with the team at the moment to kind of navigate that transition and reset expectations and support people through that change. So adaptability and agility, as we've discussed, I think, having those from the word go mean that you're more capable of or more responsive to the investment that the business will put into you to be able to get from that technical depth to the commercial application of that technical knowledge. But in addition to all of that, I think people need to kind of genuinely grasp what it means to be a sustainable business. And I think not just for our business, but for many businesses, that's becoming ever more important. So for people who bring all three, kind of that technical knowledge that they can apply commercially, the adaptability and the agility to grow and shift and change as the business changes, but also an appreciation and an understanding of how sustainability impacts businesses. Someone who brings all three, they're rare, but they're really valuable. And they're the people for us that are kind of, they're the unicorns, let's say.
I was about to use that term. Those unicorns everyone's in pursuit of.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. But worth their weight in gold when they come along, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like we have a whole workforce full of them. So we're very lucky.
And I mean, conversely, do you think weak people infrastructure can slow company growth?
Yeah, I absolutely think it can. I think it can lead to kind of a gradual erosion of momentum. So that could be through maybe founder bottlenecks. So if founders are insisting that every decision comes through them, and they're really creating that slowing the bottleneck and slowing the process. Or it could just be relying on a really few key people to get things done. That means there's a lot of pressure on those key individuals. They are at risk of burnout, which then makes, kind of real single points of failure within your business. So for us, it's been a real focus on knowledge sharing, encouraging people to collaborate and share their skills and experiences organically across the business. And so that's really important to avoiding kind of that erosion of kind of any success, I guess. I think without investing in employee growth and development and putting in those kind of clear career pathways, you essentially risk losing people or stalling them, not allowing them to fulfill their potential. So it's got to be a two-way process. People need to be willing to invest in their development. And as a business, you need to be willing to invest too and give them that support that they need to grow successfully. And for us, strong retention and internal mobility are really clear signals that our infrastructure is actually working. Our retention stats are really positive. We monitor those on a month-to-month basis, and we really pride ourselves in being able to promote people from within. And something that we've recently done is actually introduce the director level within our business. It's something that the business now needs. And for all of those levels across each of our functions, we're really proud that we've been able to develop existing employees to fulfill those positions. So that's something we're really proud of.
Yeah, I think it comes back to a little bit what we touched on earlier. It's like getting ahead of this early and having the right paid person and people in place to start addressing this stuff rather than, again, doing it as a bit of an afterthought because it's too late then.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Easier said than done, though.
It is, yeah.
It's okay. Think about sort of a little bit more around leadership, communication, trust. That's sort of part of the sort of journey. So how do you sort of feel leadership communication needs to evolve as teams grow? Because I think from my own experience that, again, you need to get ahead of the curve with your leadership because you can't lead in the same way as you did before.
Yeah, it's acknowledging that. Absolutely. So in a small team, lots of information is just naturally kind of absorbed by osmosis. So people overhear decisions, they pick up on the context of things naturally. It just kind of happens organically. But as the company scales, that stops working. So communication has to become much more intentional. And I touched on this earlier, but I think explaining the why behind decisions, not just the what of decisions, is really key so that people can stay connected to the direction of the business because they understand why we're making these decisions and why the business is moving in this way. Also, I think allowing and recognizing the importance of two-way communication and as part of that two-way feedback really supports this. And what we try to do is prevent having kind of a top-down culture. We want, although the business is growing and scaling, we want our employees to know that their voice is still valued and recognized.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd say in my last business, it was more of a grad model.
Yeah.
And we were sort of coming out of COVID, and what we did was we used data to make a decision on whether we should be at home 1 week, office 1 week, 2, 3, 3, 2. We asked people, but at the end of the day, we had to go what the data told us. And the data told us people were very, very efficient at admin duties, which in a sales role, you do need to be good at that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, what happened is when we made our decision based on the data, we had loads of unhappy people. But the decision was also made, well, you can't please everyone. But then we had graduates who had literally been in the business 6 months coming to us saying, I cannot believe you didn't consult me on that decision.
Really?
And it was like, wow, we have a rock and a hard place here because there was if we did it the other way, those people are going to be annoyed. Did that with those people. So we had to do it based on the data, and that's the only fair way of doing it. But it was the non-consulting, which they were and I mean furious with, challenging.
Yeah. It's a difficult one. Like you said, I think you're never going to please everybody. So you're making decisions that support the greatest number of people within the business, but also the business. You're supporting the needs of the business to be able to move forward in the way that the strategy intends it to. So sometimes not every decision is popular, but if you can explain why you got to that decision, people are much more accepting of it generally, we find, rather than having it imposed on them. They understand there's been a process to get there.
Yeah. And again, our communication could have probably been better about how we got there, and you learn things the hard way, right?
You live and learn.
You do. But then equally, I think, on that sort of same train of thought, we had to then rebuild trust with that demographic that were unhappy with that decision. So what have you found sort of can create trust internally during periods of rapid change?
You mentioned this. transparent communication is really key for us. And I think being honest about where the business is and why
Yeah.
the decisions have been made is really, really important. And explaining to people that this decision is made to support the growth and development and the business to be able to move forward in the right way. I think for us, we found that periodically kind of reconnecting and regrounding the team with our mission has been really, really key. And then the values that obviously support that mission. So it helps keep trust intact, I think, through periods of change. And it helps people to remember why we're all here and why we're doing what we're doing, because we're a very mission-led business, and reconnecting people with that mission really helps people to realize that the reason we make these decisions is to support that mission ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. I think a mission-driven business, you can really lean on that in the right way.
Yeah,
Not in a, that sounds like you can manipulate. No, I don't mean that. I mean, you can just lean on that because those people are in there for the right place, and that's just a nice
exactly.
reminder.
Yeah, yeah.
And then where do you find, these lovely founders or exec teams, unintentionally create confusion in this sort of space?
Yeah. So potentially, although your mission is staying consistent, the operating reality is changing around that. And that hasn't necessarily been spelled out to people. So people can then be unclear on whether it's still kind of a model of explore freely, or actually now the focus is prove commercial value. And we have been through that shift, but we've communicated that and we've explained to people why we're making that shift. And we've been really clear, we've presented numbers, we've presented rationale, presented the business strategy. So people are really, really aware of why we're making these changes. So essentially, I think naming that shift removes the confusion for people. But that's not where it stops, essentially. I think highlighting it is one thing, but managing people effectively and then supporting your people through that shift is a really important part of that journey and that process. So it is all about bringing people along with you through that change process. And just because you've highlighted it to somebody doesn't mean that they've got the capabilities or the understanding to be able to navigate it alone. They need support and kind of guidance and management to be able to do that. So investing in your managers in the business to manage well and support the business decisions and initiatives and communicate those in the right way to their team is really, really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had as my last question in this section to be, how important is transparency during scaling? One, I think you've answered it. And also I think just as much transparency as you can offer the employees at any time, just, produces a much happier, content,
Yeah.
bought in team. I know
Yeah.
it can't be about everything, but I think the more leaders can do this, the better. And having been a grad growing up in a business where there was no transparency and things just happen, and you think, well, that's a bit strange, to
Yeah.
trying to do it too far the other way and going, well, that burnt me as well. But I think that transparency is so, so critical.
It is. Yeah, I think you've got to be candid about the roller coaster of the business journey, but pairing that with a clear forward plan is really, really key so that people don't become terrified about where they are currently. They can see a way out of this, and that helps people buy into that plan. But it also sustains engagement, and that's much stronger than just telling a polished story that eventually people will realize isn't the truth, and that erodes trust.
Big time.
So true. Okay. So looking at building teams that scale, right? So in your opinion, what do you think separates teams that scale well from teams that fracture?
Yeah, I think for us, it's been about collaboration, especially kind of cross-functional collaboration. So making sure that we retain that, we call it a one team approach across Xampla. So we have different departments and different functions doing different things, but no one team or no one function can operate independently. Every team is linked to another in some way. So it's making sure, and actually one of our values is about collaboration, and we really reward and recognize when people collaborate effectively, especially cross-functionally. But it's that piece around knowledge sharing and bringing people with you and sharing kind of ideas and sharing the importance of decisions that helps drive the business forward. So yeah, for us, it's all about collaboration and making sure that we're not siloed. We're not working in silos as things grow.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting question, right, for you, this next one, because I think this is something that we see founders putting a large focus on. So I'm interested to get your take. How important is values alignment versus capability?
Yeah. So for me, I think values alignment with, let's call it a kind of teachable base, will usually beat a perfectly credentialed candidate who lacks versatility or doesn't work in the same way that your values require them to work. So yeah, that's kind of what I would always go for. Example, we hire for culture ads. So we look for people who can bring something that enhances the culture that we have rather than kind of adding to it or becoming a mirror of all of the other people that we've got in the business. But what we don't tend to compromise on is our values alignment. That is really essential for us because it's not just about what you can do, but it's the way you do it. And it's the way people work that makes sure that the business is productive and engaged and, sharing knowledge and ultimately then is success, in my experience anyway.
Okay. Now that value add piece is really interesting. We were speaking to a founder the other day, and they said that they've got this sort of policy of wanting to have something additional that people are really interested in, really passionate about. Just sort of separately. It's not a hard and fast thing, but it's just trying to, I guess, build a team that's diverse. It doesn't have to be all of the same things. But it's just having passionate about something outside of work and excel in a different area, different field.
Yeah, that's the thing. And actually, with values alignment, it doesn't have to be professional examples. It's how someone operates, who they are, their ethics, their morals, the way that they kind of build that we're kind of looking at when we're kind of interviewing and hiring against values alignment.
Yeah. Okay. And in your experience, what kind of people thrive, or is there one type of person that sort of thrives in a scaling environment?
I don't think there's one type of person, but I think there's kind of a skill set that most people that I've seen kind of succeed in scaling environments are those who are adaptable. They've got that versatility and a willingness to maybe take a sidestep in their career, open to new projects, willingness to just get involved across the business and not just stay narrowly, in their lane. For us as well, the people that thrive are the ones who are genuinely driven by the mission. So I think anybody who kind of really cares about the work that the business is trying to do and wants to contribute to that is going to succeed as a result. I think if you're one of those people that says that's not in my job description and I have no interest of stepping out of my lane, then actually that's quite limiting for personal development, but then equally can be limiting for business performance because you've not got people stepping in to support the business in the areas that it needs at that time.
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting one. And what sort of signals tell you that a company is scaling healthily?
For us, it's been around retention. So having really kind of strong retention and that internal mobility, they're kind of key performance indicators for us to know that we're scaling healthily. I think the ability to redeploy talent as priorities shifts kind of is cheaper really than constantly hiring and then putting, it's also a lot less disruptive for the existing workforce. So being able to change around the talent that you have rather than constantly get rid, re-employ, get rid, re-employ, it just erodes the culture that you have.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, we've kind of recently introduced that director level, which is been really great for us because that's helped us kind of recognize the importance of investing in our people and retaining those people. For me, investing in your people to succeed and grow and develop, it just makes good business sense. Ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the hardest things to get right. Everybody talks about finding the right people and hiring the right people. It's one of the biggest challenges around work. So if you can, you're never going to remove that. If you can reduce it through really good retention, you probably have more than halfway there, right? So
yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, there are times when if your retention's, I say too good, but sometimes retention can work negatively within a business. And, for whatever reason, you might not have your salaries benchmarked quite correctly, Or you might have individuals who, for whatever reason, are tied within your business and unable to leave despite the fact that they want to when they're disengaged. So a certain amount of staff turnover is healthy, and you want that because you want to bring new people into the business. You want diversity, change in perception of things and the way that we operate. But you obviously don't want people to be leaving continuously because it has a major knock-on effect.
Is it Willie Walsh? Rule? Am I thinking of the right guy? Anybody?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. They went a bit crunchy for a minute.
I was just saying, was it Willie Walsh, the guy that had the sort of the 10% rule? Am I thinking of the right individual? And sort of just getting rid of the bottom 10%. I'm not suggesting that's what you were aiming for, but
No, there's a lot of companies that do that. I'm sure Google do that, don't they? That every year they just get rid of their kind of lowest performing 10%, which is harsh. I think living in a business where that threat is hanging over you I don't think it's healthy. I think it creates a culture of fear, and it also doesn't support people to work in a way that's collaborative or with the best intention of the business. I think it encourages people to hide a lot of mistakes rather than accept mistakes, own mistakes, and learn from mistakes. For us, it's not an approach I'm comfortable with, but I see why businesses do it, especially large organizations, when they're looking at people as numbers. But in smaller organizations where I prefer to be, it's about considering, what that person can bring to the business and then kind of utilizing that and growing that for them and for the business.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you can't really have it's really the position is the same. A lot of people to be comfortable failing and sort of almost seeking it out. But then equally, if you do that, you're going to be then lumped in with this bottom 10% and then potentially at risk. So it's
Yeah.
I think you also get companies, get people in the company rather that are very self-focused. It's looking after number one, because you have to be a bit like that. Fine, in a bigger company, I get why they want to drive that, but I think in a smaller company, that is a proper culture killer.
Yeah.
Glad we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
So just in terms of a little bit more sort of founder, people perspective type chats, sort of what beliefs around culture or hiring have changed the most for you?
So I feel like I'm repeating what I've said now, but I think it is that move away from kind of narrow niche technical perfection and skill set, or just hiring somebody who ticks the box now to hiring somebody who can really support the business as they grow forward. So has that values alignment, that adaptability, and you can teach the rest. Because actually, generally, people that you bring into a business are ambitious and they want to grow and develop, and that is often a really important selling point, is knowing that somebody knowing that you're willing to invest in them and support them on that career journey. So yeah, I think it is, for me, it's that shift from let's get every box ticked and get the right person in now to actually that person might not be the right person in the future. So let's look at considering what we actually need to support the growth of the business. Yeah. So again, it's around that diversity as well. So rather than hiring candidates who share, it's not, we're moving away from culture fit. It's not about getting people who've got the same backgrounds or the same interests or the same working styles to add to the team so they fit in well. It's about hiring those who align with those core values that really underpin how the business operates. People, with skill sets that might bring diverse perspectives or skills or experiences, and they challenge the status quo and they push the company to think in a different way. And ultimately, that way of thinking and that innovation is what moves the company forward rather than kind of stagnating and staying where it is.
Is that too late? Should we be doing it way before that? But yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think the temptation for after you've just raised funds is to grow rapidly. You've got all this money in the bank and you think, right, we can do all of these wonderful things. So let's build our team. But my advice or my words of wisdom would be to grow strategically, grow based on kind of mapping your skills and the skills that you need within the business, invest in people that you've got and redeploy your existing people to fill those skills gap, and only hire externally when you know that you truly can't build that capability from the team that you already have. It's not a numbers game. It's not about increasing headcount for the sake of increasing headcount. And it's about increasing headcount to support the strategic growth and direction of the business. And again, hire for adaptability, because although it might be what you need now, who knows what direction the business might take. And you need people who are going to be adaptable enough to adjust to those business changes when they come. So for me, that's really the best way to kind of hedge against the changing priorities. And also, if you think externally, there are tightening employment law changes coming in. So hiring for adaptability and hiring strategically mean that you're going to be in less hot water down the line.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Totally agree with you there. And we've talked about this a fair bit, what scaling companies should think about earlier. But to put it nicely in a box in one part of the podcast, have you got sort of like a bit of a bullet point list that you think, these are the things?
Yeah, I think defining your values early so that your culture scales deliberately rather than accidentally, I think that's key. Also building career paths and coaching in from the start. And for us, that's underpinned by kind of regular feedback conversations. So we adopt the radical candor approach to feedback, which we have found is key to addressing issues and to improving performance at that time. And it's a two-way process, and you feedback up and we feedback down. So I think building those into your process early is easier than trying to bob these on at a later stage. And as with anything, your values to be embedded and for your career and coaching conversations to happen, they need to be consistent and they need to be role modeled by your leadership, because they take time to embed. I think starting early on these and being intentional is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. Just looking ahead then, Faye, what do you think the best climate companies will begin to understand about people and culture over the next few years?
Yeah, I think the mission is a real magnet, especially for kind of early career talent who want meaningful work. And that's something that I've really found has increased throughout my time at Xampla. But that mission has to be backed by a genuine investment in the people that you have in your team to retain them, especially early career talent. They are very ambitious and they want to know that the business is investing as them as much as they're putting into the organization. So for culture ads, values-led hiring is what really keeps scaling teams to be diverse and equitable and also resilient to the kind of changing needs of the business.
Right. Okay. And what sort of capabilities do you think will matter most if those businesses scale?
Yeah, it's kind of wraps up everything we've said, really. It's that kind of technical commercial ability, but also that values alignment blend. So those areas, above all else, it's that adaptability and the willingness to be redeployed as the business evolves based on business needs.
Okay. And then just finally, what gives you optimism about where Xampla's heading next?
Yeah, so Xampla has been on a very exciting journey, for its previous 5 years or 5+ years that I've been with the business. And I'm really excited for what, the next 5+ years bring for Xampla. So we've crossed the line from kind of promising science to something that's commercially viable. And that's our reality now. Our mono material is in market. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we're scaling towards 10,000 tons a year, which is really impressive and significant for us. The exciting part of that from a people perspective is that we've built a team that has taken kind of 15+ years of Cambridge University research and we've commercialized it. And it's that deep blend of science and commercial drive that we've has been kind of the thread throughout this podcast, that is rare to find. But it's what makes our goal to eliminate the world's most polluting plastics credible rather than aspirational. But it's because of the team we have. And it's our culture that's really helped us through and held us through that transition. We are genuinely a mission-driven team. And, because of our strong retention and our values that have been built deliberately to support our business, I am confident that we will scale and grow into a really, really successful commercial organization.
Fantastic. Looking forward to getting you back on in sort of a year or two and seeing how you're going on that journey. I mean, it's something,
exactly.
It's a fantastic mission to be involved in, right? And I think specifically the Xampla mission is something that's very tangible to everybody's everyday life, which I mean, as Alex touched on earlier, it's a very real big problem. It's a very big problem. It's a very real problem, and it's something that, as I said, touches everyone. So, yeah.
Exactly. It does. And that's the thing. I think because it's such a visible problem and every single person is impacted by it, and that is a real kind of pull for us when we're looking at hiring people in, but also retaining that talent. And that the mission is a really valuable attraction part of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think with what Xampla are doing at the moment, we could get you back on in 3 months. You'd probably have a lot more stuff to say. So
Although I'm sure there'll be loads of learnings and changes and things that we've had to navigate even in a 3 month period. Things are constantly shifting and changing, but that's what keeps it interesting and exciting.
absolutely. Well, look, we will definitely get you back on in that case, Faye. Thank you for your time. It was a
Thank
great,
you.
it was a great hour to spend with you. So thanks again.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.